1 minute ago, Britain witnessed a moment so explosive that it sent shockwaves through every corner of the nation. Keir Starmer, the man who once stood at the height of political power, has just been publicly humiliated by King Charles III. What started as a quiet disagreement between Downing Street and Buckingham Palace has now erupted into a full-scale constitutional firestorm. Insiders are calling it the most devastating clash between a prime minister and a monarch in modern history. What King Charles did calmly, silently, and with unmistakable precision has not only shattered Starmer's image, but also exposed deep cracks within the very foundation of his government. If you thought, as Starmer's earlier controversies were bad, this time it's far beyond damage control. The Prime Minister is bleeding credibility, and the nation is erupting with anger, disbelief, and outrage. It all began earlier this week during what was meant to be a routine audience between King Charles and Keir Starmer at Buckingham Palace. These meetings, normally shrouded in discretion, have always followed one sacred rule. Whatever is said between the monarch and the Prime Minister stays private. But according to palace insiders, something unprecedented happened. Starmer reportedly confronted the king about his interference in national matters, referencing a recent charity speech where Charles had emphasised the importance of preserving Britain's traditions and unity in uncertain times. What sounded harmless to the public was, according to Downing Street sources, seen by Starmer as a veiled criticism of his policies. The tension inside that room, witnesses say, was thick enough to cut with a knife. Then came the moment that would define the week. King Charles, maintaining his signature calm demeanour, allegedly said, "Leadership requires humility, not hostility." Those words, simple yet razor sharp, cut straight to the heart of the Prime Minister's pride. Within hours, whispers began to spread through Westminster. The King's comment had stung Starmer deeply, and his reaction was anything but measured. At an emergency Labour Party meeting later that night, multiple attendees described the Prime Minister as visibly furious, pacing and shouting about royal overreach. According to one cabinet insider, Starmer slammed his folder on the table and snapped, "The monarchy should remember who runs this country." The statement, though made in a closed room, leaked within minutes. The following morning, nearly every front page in Britain carried the same headline: Starmer clashes with King over monarchy's role. It was the spark that ignited a wildfire. From that moment, public outrage spread faster than any political scandal in recent memory. On social media, hashtags like #StandWithTheKing and #RespectTheCrown began trending within hours. TikTok, Twitter and Facebook were flooded with videos of furious citizens calling Starmer a disgrace to British tradition. Even lifelong Labour supporters began to distance themselves. A viral clip from a 70-year-old retired nurse summed up the nation's mood perfectly. "You can disagree with policies, but you don't humiliate the king." Meeting. Not in Britain. Her words struck a nerve across generations. Within 24 hours, Starmer's approval ratings collapsed like a house of cards. Inside Downing Street, panic was immediate. Advisors scrambled to contain the fallout, insisting that the meeting had been misrepresented and that Starmer's comments were taken out of context. But the damage was already done. Palace officials refused to deny the King's remark, further fueling speculation that Charles had quietly drawn a line against Starmer's growing arrogance. For the first time since his election, Starmer looked like a man completely out of control. Even his own ministers began to turn cold. Education Secretary Bridget Phillipson reportedly told aides that she was sick of defending the indefensible. Chancellor Rachel Reeves, usually one of Starmer's staunchest allies, refused to appear on television that week. Her silence spoke louder than words. Then came the moment that turned a crisis into a catastrophe. During a heated parliamentary session, Starmer tried to dismiss the entire controversy as royal gossip. His tone, mocking, dismissive and visibly irritated, was caught live on camera. And then, just as he uttered the phrase, "the monarchy should stay out of politics," Conservative MPs erupted in outrage. The Speaker had to intervene to restore order, but the damage was irreversible. Across Britain, viewers watched their Prime Minister sneer at the very institution millions hold sacred. Commentators immediately compared the clip to the infamous moments of political downfall from decades past. Leaders undone not by their enemies, but by their own pride. Within hours of the broadcast, a new storm brewed, this time from Buckingham Palace itself. In what insiders described as a masterstroke of quiet defiance, King Charles made a surprise public appearance at a charity event in Windsor. He didn't mention politics nor the Prime Minister by name, but his words carried unmistakable weight. Respect, he said, pausing for effect, is not demanded. It is earned through service, duty and understanding the heart of this nation. The audience erupted in applause. Royal commentators instantly recognised the veiled response to Starmer's arrogance. The king had spoken not through confrontation, but through calm, unshakable authority. That single moment flipped the narrative entirely. Overnight, the monarchy was seen as the symbol of dignity, while Starmer's government looked petty and unstable. Pollsters reported a staggering 15-point drop in Labour's approval within 48 hours. Newspapers across the political spectrum ran variations of the same headline: King Charles outshines Starmer. Even foreign media weighed in. In Australia, commentators called the situation a humiliation for Britain's leadership. American outlets mocked Starmer's tone-deaf response, with one anchor bluntly stating, "You don't pick a fight with your king and expect to win." By the end of the week, it was clear Keir Starmer wasn't just facing political backlash, he was facing a public reckoning. The Crown had not needed to shout, threaten or intervene. Its quiet strength had spoken louder than any political speech, and for the first time in decades, Britain's people had chosen their side. Not with the politicians in Westminster, but with the king who stood above them all. As the days passed, the humiliation of Keir Starmer only deepened. What had begun as a small spark of tension between Buckingham Palace and Downing Street had grown into a full-blown national reckoning. Starmer's words, his tone, and his defiance had turned him into a symbol of arrogance in the eyes of millions. Inside Labour headquarters, chaos reigned. Leaks poured out by the hour, text messages, internal memos, cabinet whispers, all painting the same grim picture. The party was tearing itself apart. Senior MPs described the mood as apocalyptic. "We're watching our government collapse in real time," one veteran member reportedly told the BBC. Damage control had become impossible. Every attempt to defend the Prime Minister only made things worse as the press unearthed new evidence of Starmer's frustration with the monarchy. What had once been a unified front now looked like a battlefield of betrayal and ambition. Behind closed doors, King Charles remained silent, but his silence was deafening. Every time the palace declined to comment, Starmer's critics grew louder. Constitutional scholars praised the king's restraint, calling it a masterclass in leadership under pressure. His calm dignity stood in stark contrast to the Prime Minister's frantic denials and angry press statements. The nation watched in fascination as the monarch's quiet strength slowly dismantled Starmer's authority. The polls confirmed it. Labour had fallen below 25% support for the first time since the early 2000s, while Reform UK surged to unprecedented levels. Nigel Farage, sensing opportunity, moved swiftly. Standing outside Parliament draped in Union Jacks, he declared that the Crown is not the problem, it's the politicians who've forgotten who they serve. His words hit home. Across Britain, ordinary citizens nodded in agreement. The political tide was turning fast. Meanwhile, inside Labour's inner circle, panic had turned into open rebellion. Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner began holding quiet meetings with disillusioned MPs, urging calm while secretly gauging support for a leadership challenge. Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, had gone completely silent in public, but insiders claimed she was already positioning herself as the sensible alternative should Starmer fall. Diane Abbott, the party's elder stateswoman, broke ranks altogether. In a leaked voice note, she called Starmer's behaviour an embarrassment to Labour's history and to the country. The leak went viral within hours, spreading across social media like wildfire. Hashtags such as #StarmerOut and hashtag Stand With The King dominated every platform. Protesters even began gathering outside Downing Street, waving the Union Jack and chanting for the Prime Minister's resignation. The atmosphere grew darker by the hour. Cabinet meetings reportedly descended into shouting matches. Transport Secretary Louise Haigh was seen leaving Number 10 in tears, refusing to defend the Prime Minister's latest remarks. "He's lost control," she was overheard telling aides. "We're sinking." And he's still arguing with the King. Newspapers captured the image and ran it under the headline, "Labour meltdown, ministers in revolt." Even foreign leaders began distancing themselves. In Canada, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau diplomatically praised King Charles's unwavering commitment to stability, a thinly veiled signal of where international confidence now rested. The White House remained silent, but one senior aide, speaking anonymously to US networks, described the crisis as the kind of chaos America expects from weak governments, not Britain. By the end of the week, the writing was on the wall. Labour's once solid majority was disintegrating, and backbench MPs began preparing letters of no confidence, and the scale of rebellion was staggering. More than 40 members of Parliament had reportedly pledged to support a leadership contest if Starmer refused to step down. Political analysts called it a slow-motion implosion. Even the Prime Minister's own advisers began to waver. His chief strategist was photographed leaving Downing Street late at night, grim-faced, refusing to answer questions. The next morning, he resigned. The exodus had begun. Every departure added weight to the narrative that Starmer's leadership was collapsing under the pressure of his own hubris. Meanwhile, King Charles continued to embody calm resilience. He carried on with public duties, meeting veterans, attending charity galas, and visiting flood-hit communities, but his every word was scrutinised for meaning. In Manchester, he gave a speech about unity and tradition that many interpreted as another subtle rebuke to Starmer's divisive tone. "Our strength," the King said, "lies not in tearing down what binds us, but in remembering who we are." The crowd erupted in applause. The image of the King standing dignified before thousands while the Prime Minister hid from cameras became the defining contrast of the crisis. Commentators called it poetic justice, a monarch rising above politics while the politician drowns in it. As tensions peaked, rumours spread that Starmer was considering an emergency reshuffle to restore control, but it was far too late. The damage had already been done. Several ministers refused to serve, warning that associating themselves with him would be career suicide. The opposition, sensing blood in the water, moved in for the kill. Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch took to Parliament with one of the most blistering speeches of her career, declaring this Prime Minister has insulted not just the crown, but the very soul of this country. Her words were met with thunderous applause. Even some Labour MPs nodded in quiet agreement. Then came the final humiliation. Late one night, Buckingham Palace released a rare statement, not about politics, but about unity. His Majesty, it read, believes that in times of division, our shared values must guide us forward. The message, calm and brief, resonated across the nation. To many, it was the King's subtle but undeniable declaration of moral authority. Within hours, front pages across Britain declared, "King Charles restores dignity. Starmer isolated." By dawn, petitions calling for Starmer's resignation had reached over 1 million signatures. His approval rating was the lowest of any Prime Minister in modern history. As dawn broke over Westminster, Britain felt changed. The Crown had not spoken loudly, but its quiet power had reshaped the nation. The Prime Minister who dared to challenge the monarchy had found himself humiliated, abandoned and alone. History will remember this as the week when the arrogance of politics met the endurance of tradition and lost. And as King Charles carried on with his duties, his composure untarnished, one truth became impossible to ignore: the monarchy still stands, stronger than ever, while those who challenge its dignity fall one by one beneath its silent weight.